Welcome to Pacific Beer Chat. Mike from Mike's Craft Beer. We got Terry from West Coast Beer Geek. Steve from Mike's Craft Beer. Got Chelsea from Brutiful BC. Carnell from Breward Inlet. And we've got Mike from the Beer Raider. We've also got a special guest today. We've got Paul, and I'll let him introduce himself here.
Hey, my name's Paul Pine, Certified CIcerone since 2015. Just been working in the industry for a few years, currently doing beer sales for Bomber Brewing, and also have DrinkSmarter.ca, which is a hospitality outlet trainings company, as well as just general tasting.
So basically, you're really busy.
Yes.
All right, perfect. Well, I think today we're going to talk a little bit about beer education in general. Paul, could you just tell us what a Cicerone is quickly?
I guess in the industry standard, it's the equivalent to a sommelier with wine. As the closest I can relate it to, it really just stems to an old title that is somebody who is trained in a specific entity and is able to train other people and teach other people those things as well. It comes from the word to be basically a tour guide and to tour people around and show them what's what.
Awesome. Chelsea, did you want to start off? I think you had a good starting point. Do you remember?
I had to figure out how to unmute. Yeah, so I was just wondering because we hear a little bit about Cicerone, we hear a little bit about people who have the beer judging certification. Can you tell me how those two things are different?
Yeah, so the beer judge certification is a separate entity that has a say in the style guidelines, as well as the AHA, the American Homebrewers Association. Those two organizations are the ones who sort of depict what styles are styles. Hence the recent changes in 2015 that brought upon this plethora of new styles and stuff to the beer categories. So they are trained in a different facet. It's just a different way of getting the education.
And how does the training differ for you versus them?
I have not really done the BJCP training, so I can't really say on that side of things. It's definitely more style derivative and recipe based and things of that nature, whereas the Cicerone is more broad span of history and styles and things like that. I have helped judge in competitions for the past couple of years, and because I don't have that certification, I do need to be paired up with the BJCP because essentially they know more about styles than I do specifically.
Okay.
Makes sense.
I hope.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I mean, I guess a really simple one. I mean, we all, as craft beer geeks, know that serving temperature is really important. Anyone else want to kind of throw in their 2 cents about why it's so important for the broader audience?
Sure. I mean, it's really just a lot of styles are very dependent on that temperature. Just the classic example is I like to use is a nice big stout. Drink it, start it nice and cold, let it warm up as you drink it, and you can see yourself the difference that it makes. It softens up the roasty characters. The chocolate will come a little more predominant, things like that. So it's definitely style dependent, but also very important.
Yeah,
sure. If you ever get a chance, do a side-by-side, like warm one up and then drink one right out of the fridge and compare them. I know in a couple of bloggers conferences and stuff like that, they've done those side-by-side comparisons, like the vendors there, and it's for some people it's pretty mind-blowing. But it's funny, most places serve beer too cold, especially certain styles. I mean, not everything's supposed to be served warm. But, I'm just like wine. Most places serve wine too warm in a lot of cases, or red wine too warm and white wine too cold. So that's my biggest beef is around bars and restaurants. I wish started paying a little bit more attention to serving temperature for some of the bigger stouts, especially, and some of the other beers that they have around. Because it's nice, it sucks to kind of sit there and wait for those. If you know it's going to be too cold, you got to order something else to drink while it's warming up, or you do the hand thing, for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit complicated.
It's a challenge for the bars, especially when you're dealing with beer on tap, because generally you have one beer cooler at one temperature, and each beer requires a range of proper temperatures. You're not going to have a separate cooler for each beer that's dialed into it, and so that's just ridiculous in terms of for restaurant setup, and so that's kind of why we're stuck with this one temperature. Now, I agree that different beer, it's good to have at different temperatures, but you kind of have to weigh your costs at that point on, how many nerds are going to complain about their beer being a couple degrees off versus people that are just generally going to be okay with it.
Yeah, for sure. I met up with the guys from Torchlight Brewing in Nelson today in Vancouver, and they were saying in their new location that they're opening up soon, they're going to actually have two different coolers, one for most of their beers, and then they're going to have one that's only for nitro and used mostly for stouts. So they're actually actively going out of their way to have two different temperature levels for their beer.
That's great.
Yeah, I'd love to see more stuff like that. I mean, even just putting in the keg in a different zone of the cooler can help, right? Yeah. So, but I get it. I get the challenges, right? And restaurants probably a little bit too much to expect, but a brewery or a very, very craft focused bar, I'd like to see a little bit more of that. Just enhances the experience, right? So.
Yeah, and I mean, it could be as simple as something, just having a separate kegerator for that one beer.
Oh, for sure.
So it is very doable, but for restaurants, it's definitely more of a challenge. But yeah, a beer-centric place could definitely support that.
Mm-hmm.
You just build a pit, right? Dig a hole into the ground and keep that beer there.
Yeah.
Keep it at temp all the time.
Yeah, why do we need a sitting room here when we got such gems like that out at Carnell?
Dig a hole. Just dig a hole.
Dig a hole. Put some stuff in the hole.
Yeah.
Put the stouts at the top of the hole and then lagers at the bottom. I don't know.
That's right. Beer cave.
Yeah. So I to go with the questions. Ask the Cicerone. I have a question for Paul. I've chatted to a couple Cicerones who, after you've gone through the program, after you've gone through the tasting, you've developed your palate and that. Some have said to a certain point it's ruined beer, not completely, but it's ruined their experience because they no longer can just go into a brewery or a bar or what have you and just enjoy the beer. You're now basically programmed to analyze it, so to speak. So I don't know. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I definitely, there is truth in that for sure. That's why I chose out of all of the levels of progression with the program I knew going into it, I didn't want to get any further than certified, just because I didn't want to think of beer as that organic biochemistry, molecular kind of yeast structure and look at it that way and just kind of, because it's kind of gross when you look at it. If you ever looked at yeast under a microscope, it's not pretty. So I just definitely knew that I just wanted to get more appreciation for it, more of an understanding for it, more than anything. But even with that, yeah, there's times that, oxidization for me is, I can smell it from a mile away. And it does kind of ruin some beers for me when you get these off flavors that a large percentage of people aren't going to be picking up. It does kind of go, oh man, that sucks. It makes you feel like a snob when you don't want to be a snob. But sometimes beer is just undrinkable.
Oh yeah,
this is true.
Yeah, and there are some situations where had I not gone through the rigorous training and all the studying, that I would never even have noticed it, and I could have enjoyed that beer. But there's definitely that moment where you're like, yep.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it's bad for us in general as bloggers.
When you poured it.
I used to. I don't anymore. At first, I was like, "Oh, I'm wasting this beer." But honestly, if I'm not enjoying it, I'm not going to force myself to drink it. I got a lot more beer I can crack if I really want to have something. And I drink beer out of enjoyment, you know, and that's my main focus. It's not to get drunk or to have a good time. It's I really do appreciate the craft, and I love the results of these simple ingredients being put to use in different ways.
Totally.
Do you find the opposite of that? Like when you see perfection, does it impress you more?
Yes, absolutely. I do really appreciate a fantastic beer. You know, when I have those, I still to this day have epiphany beers where I go, oh, that's where it's at. That's what I'm looking for. And it honestly can also ruin other beers because you're like, you find that perfect IPA and you're like, all right, well, no other IPA is going to do now.
Like Fat Tug.
No comment.
Funny, we did a blind tasting a little while back, and that actually fared better than I figured it would. Compared up to
Honestly,
some of the others.
when I actually was first studying beer, I opened up the Tap and Barrel in Cole Harbor, and before that was ready to open, I was working at the Olympic Village location, and I was like, all right, I got to try all these beers, these 24 taps. I'm going to start on the left and work my way down the right as I go through. Fat Tug was the only 7-ounce sample that I could not finish. It was the only one. And that put me off IPAs for a long time. And then I did start getting into the IPAs, and now I absolutely love them. And I thought to myself, oh, I'll go back and visit Fat Tug. I still am. I get it, but it's too sweet for me. That's the only thing. I don't dislike. I love Driftwood as a brewery. I don't get the Fat Tug fascination.
Makes sense.
Should I have not said that?
So
No.
just
Honest. We're all open and honest here.
so just a follow up and a little slightly off topic there, but related to your training. How long is the process typically for people to, when you first say, hey, I want to do this, and you buy some books to study and some beers to study and do a lot of reading. That's from what I understand. How long is it a recommended time frame for people to reasonably expect, okay, I can start this today? Let's say they're starting as a beer fan, a craft beer fan, but they're not in the industry and stuff like that. What would you say is a typical time frame?
I think 2 years is a good number to casually saunter through 1,000 beers and read the dozens of books that you're going to read. And I think more than anything, you just really kind of have to actually have an appreciation and a passion for it. I think people who want to do it just because they want to do it, it's going to be a little more of a struggle. But you can do it in a shorter time frame, I'm sure. For myself, it was about 2 years. I did the training. I took the classes at Pico with Chester and, went that route. I don't really know anybody. I know a couple of people that got the exam on their first time, and both the tasting and the written component. I was not one of those people. I did have to do it, the written exam again. So that also is a consideration as well with it. And the exam is only offered in Vancouver twice a year, and that's only if there's enough participants to make it warranted.
Right.
Jeez.
But you can travel down to Blaine. They do it often in Blaine and Seattle and stuff too.
I think it's going on in San Diego right now. Today.
That's
I
for
think
an
so.
upper level, though, I think.
I don't know.
That might be
I've
the
got-
advanced, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm a
'cause I know
certified
a girl that's
server,
there right
and
now
that's-
from Ontario.
Yeah. I've never met her, but I'm her Facebook friend. So, that's just the same.
I've met her.
So that kind of leads into the one of the questions I prepared, which was, what exactly is Cicerone training for? I mean, an industry aspect to it, and people, a career or a job, but is it for beer geeks, hobbyists? What sort of level of commitment are we looking at for getting some level of Cicerone training?
I mean, for myself personally, I can only speak to my own experiences, of course. But I was hoping it was going to open a lot more doors than it probably didn't. I think there's definitely still not a need for, like, restaurants aren't hiring cicerones like they are having sommeliers. They're not, having that presence isn't really there. It has definitely helped me in my quest to advance myself in the beer community, absolutely. But I don't know if it's really, it's not something that's going to be like, okay, well, now there's a million doors open for you. People are hiring cicerones left, right, and center. It's really still quite one of those things where people, oh, you're what? What is that? Tell me more. Right? So I don't know if we've gotten to that level quite yet.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
the food industry hasn't really embraced beer with the same sort of debonair as wine. There's not that many high-end restaurants that would have someone there that really knows their beer like they do at sommelier.
Yeah, I mean,
or even hotels, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of really high-end restaurants that really don't even have beer taps. You know, they're more about wines and cocktails. So
garbage beer.
And what's that?
And garbage beer.
Or that, right? Yeah. But I think it's people are starting to recognize it now. I think the effect is there. It's starting to trickle down. The concept of food and beer pairings is starting to roll through with people now. You know, the Whistler Beer Fest, they do that sommelier versus cicerone luncheon every year, and cicerone wins every time. You know,
Nice.
Beer just goes better with food. It's just a natural thing.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed, talking a little bit about it, not to the cicerone level, but they also have the certified beer
Server?
yeah.
server.
And beer craft, I think, and maybe even St. Augustine's get most or all of their service to at least that level of training.
And Big Rock as well.
Do they? Okay.
I think having taken that course for when I was starting up with Trading Post, and I think their initial goal was to have all the servers with the certified beer server. I don't believe that's where they are now. I don't know. In terms of a base level of knowledge, I think the certified beer server is a good course. I think any beer nerd could probably enter that exam and pass, just out of general knowledge, although there are some specific questions that can throw you. But this is just my feeling. Between certified beer server and certified cicerone is a huge gap.
Oh yeah.
And I feel there's a need for something in there that, say, a hobbyist that really wants some kind of certification for some validation or whatever could go after without really having to commit to the full cicerone certification. But that's just me thinking. I don't know.
No, but I think that's where the BJCP comes in. It's a really nice, you know, it's got that element to it that is more than just hobbyist, more than just intrigued or enthused. It really shows dedication. It really does show commitment and knowledge. And you know, I was looking to do my BJCP just after I got my cicerone, and I planned on doing it because they were just about to change. The style guidelines were about to change, and I had spent all that time studying those styles, and then they had just switched. So I'm eventually going to do it, hopefully. Yeah, I've like I said, I've done some judging with some BJCP, so I've earned points, I guess, in some sort of way that are being banked until I get some sort of certification with them, and then I can use those banked points to progress within the category as well.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Hey.
And I guess speaking of other levels, there's 2 higher levels now for cicerone?
Yeah, so it was originally just the 3, the certified beer server, certified cicerone, and master cicerone. And like Mike said, the jump from certified beer server to certified cicerone is just massive. And the jump from certified cicerone to master cicerone is astronomical. So they decided to add another level in between 2 and 3, and it's called advanced cicerone. So it's a little bit more. It's more in to the side, you know, but not quite that ridiculous phase. But still more than I think I'm willing to commit to.
Makes sense.
Cool. On the lighter side, do you feel that having a beard gives you legitimacy in terms
Yes.
of being a Cicerone?
Yes. I have to grow it out a little bit just because, I actually had a beard when I was getting into it, and so it just seemed natural.
Great.
Yeah.
I guess as a male Cicerone anyway.
Yeah. Sorry, Steve.
Well, I mean,
for the
Cornell.
female Cicerones.
Come on, it's 2017, guys.
It's true.
I felt ashamed to shave this morning, so
It's okay, Steve.
I've got a question from Reddit. I put a question up in the beer section on Reddit. Ask a Cicerone anything you want.
Uh-oh.
And the question number one here is, do you think you're better than me?
To that one person, sure.
All right.
And then no one on Reddit would answer like that. Jeez.
Oh, the internet.
It's probably what Carnell was doing.
That was Carnell's question.
That was me, yeah. No, I have a question, a real question. You guys may have asked this when I was gone because it sounded like you were getting to this, but we've talked before on this podcast and more generally about competitions, and it was interesting to hear you mention earlier that you were matched up with a BJCP for testing beers for competition. And I wonder if you ever feel sort of frustrated by the guidelines. It seems like your training versus a BJCP judge is a little more just sort of understanding the flavors, what's going on. And I wonder how well that matches up against BJCP rules, if it ever frustrates you who ends up winning, or if you're on board with it.
Honestly, not really. From all of my studying, I adhere to the same guidelines that they adhere to for styles. So we all work off the same style guidelines. The BJCPs, even with my certification, I'm not allowed to judge beer for these competitions on my own. I have to be partnered up with them because they're trained to style specificity, which is great. So I love doing that. I love working with other people and hearing their input. For me, it was nice to know that, being matched up with these people, judging the beers out, that we would often land within the same, the 5-point spectrum that we're supposed to land with each other, made me feel good knowing that, okay, good, I can hang with these guys. I can look at the beer styles and I can appreciate it the same way they can. Judging is just weird in the sense that it's very difficult to categorize a beer, especially in the craft beer community, because a lot of brewers aren't making beers to the guideline styles, because who cares what the styles are? Who cares what the guidelines are? Let's make beer that's going to taste great. Let's put this in it. Let's put that in it. Let's do this with this. Let's do that, which is why we all love craft beer. So when you have these competitions with craft beer, it's difficult to really box them. So it's more about where you actually place your beer than actually the style that it's supposed to be, which makes it for an interesting competition.
Yeah, I guess in that example, like a cloudy IPA, points for appearance should be 0, just based on the style guideline, right?
I don't know.
That being said, those are trending pretty high right now, and people are loving them.
Well, and that's just it. When we look at the style guidelines from before 2008, and leading from 2008 up into 2015, when they did change again, there was three IPA styles. There was English, American, and Imperial. That was it. And now you look at the 2015, I believe there's 7, including a specialty IPA category, which just means put whatever the hell you want in it and call it an IPA. It's kind of interesting that the way everything's changed and gone that way. So it's nice to see the competitions are changing and everybody's doing things in a different manner.
Yeah. I find it a little frustrating sometimes that sometimes the beer best to style wins, whereas by far the most tasty beer that you have there can't win because it doesn't meet that style guideline. And I find that something about that needs to still change, personally.
You know, I think the biggest thing with the competitions right now is, and I'll be painfully honest, is that there's not enough qualified people actually coming out to judge the beers. There is a big shortage of qualified people coming to judge. There's not a shortage of qualified people. There are so many people out there who are qualified to come out and judge beers. There's not enough people actually putting in the time to do it. And as the years progress, more and more breweries are coming into the fold, more and more beers are being submitted, and the workload is becoming almost unbearable. When you have a room full of 30 people judging 746 beers, there's a time that you have to get through it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I know
It's
both.
interesting hearing you mention as a CIcerone you're guiding, and I know maybe pulling out this idea of competition of beer too far, but it's something that really interests me. As a Cicerone, as you were saying, your job is sort of to guide people through beer, and maybe you're better qualified to do that. But I think I sometimes feel that the competitions are being used as a guide for most people, right? And I wonder if you feel like there's a responsibility there to guide people to what's tastes well versus, or tastes good versus.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's, you know, when it comes to that, the groupings of the beers also get a little bit different. You know, sometimes beers that were entered in one category end up going in a different category because there wasn't enough beers for that one category to merit judging, which, again, I don't run the competitions. I don't put all of that stuff into place. I just try to help out where I can. So it's just a matter of just progressing and growing with it and getting more people involved and having more hands on it.
Right.
Yeah, and I'll say there's something to be said for blind judging, blind taste testing, and tasting beers without knowing what they are. When you remove that bias, you can create some pretty surprising results that I think a lot of people. I'm guilty of it. You look at it, judging results, and you're like, really, that one? But sometimes when you're trying things and you don't know, you're not looking at the label, you're not carrying over any brand bias, it can be a bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
I know, like I said, I've done a couple, and the winner is always a bit of a shocker. You know which ones are going to be kind of the top five, but sometimes there's ones that sneak in there, and you kind of look back and you try it again, and you're like, yeah, no, this is actually pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I know me and Chelsea are both judges at the Festival in Penticton, and it can be really surprising sometimes which ones win in the end. Total shocker.
Yeah, like an Okanagan Springs beer snuck into the top at some point. Was that last year or the year before? I can't remember.
I can't remember.
Do you remember, Mike?
No, I can't remember.
I remember reading the results and being like, "What the seriously?" But I guess if it's a decent middle of the road beer, sometimes extreme doesn't work well in judging situations. You want something that's more within the style guidelines, which is good, but it's also a little bit sad because then the stuff that really stands out and is unusual, that's the stuff that doesn't really do well in judging situations. So
yeah, I don't remember if you were there that year. The one year there was a real argument over which two beers should win. And one was a fairly safe one, and one was a really, really smoky beer. And it was a battle for at least half an hour.
Well, even last year when we were talking about Persephone Pale Ale ended up winning Best in Show, but it was such a hoppy pale ale that people were going, it doesn't fall within the style guidelines, but we're like, it's also a really delicious beer, right? So what wins? The fact that I really enjoy drinking that, or the fact that it matches up with what it's supposed to be as a pale ale. Yeah.
Luckily, we don't need BJCP to be part of that.
Yeah. Although I was thinking about getting it this year just because it's nice to have that structure to be able to measure things against, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But I looked at, I can do the online portion, but the actual exam is like a lot of studying, and I'd have to go to Victoria, and living rurally, I can't do any of the study groups. I'd have to drink a lot of beer by myself, which I'm down to do, but it'd just take me a long time, right? So yeah, so maybe next year, not this year.
Yeah. So I guess maybe shifting gears a little, if you guys are okay with that.
Yeah.
We're talking a lot about palates and tasting and that. I guess I'll start with Paul, but it's certainly interested in everybody else's opinion. What are some other than the obvious, to drink beer, what are some of the ways that you've kind of trained your palate a little bit more to pick up flavors? And what are some of the things you can do to, just improve your overall ability to pick out different flavors and that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest revelation that I had when I was, getting into it was reading a book, I think by Randy Mosher, the Tasting Beer, right? Of course, everybody's read it. It's the Bible. I still use it as a resource. But there's a line in there when he starts talking about when you actually are trying to sense aroma and using that link to memory with your aroma. And rather than trying to smell the beer and go, what is this I'm smelling? Let your mind take over and say, where have I smelt this before? And let that memory come back to you. Is it fresh grass? Is it cement after a rain? Is it pumpkin pie? Whatever it might be. And that I find just really opened up the world for me, because that's more how my brain, I guess, works. So it was nice and great in that sense. Also, when you're in a grocery store and you're in the produce aisle, pick things up and just smell them. Go to the apples and smell different apples, because it's one thing to say it smells like apples, but is it Granny Smith or is it, Pink Ladies or whatever it might be? And just have fun with it. And don't try too hard.
Paul, if you could just say the name of that book and the author again for anyone listening out there that wants to.
Oh, I literally always have it nearby. It's Tasting Beer by Randy Mosher. What? This guy right here.
There we go.
Boom.
Pick it up at your local Five and Dine.
Yes. I'll have to pick that up because I have not read that one.
Yeah, it's an interesting point about the memory sensory, and as well as just like smelling things in the grocery store, eating things. Have you had a passion fruit? Can you tell the difference between a fig, a date, a prune, and a raisin? They all taste a little bit different.
Yep.
So that's one thing I find is just trying things that you haven't tried before, or if find a passion fruit and have a passion fruit beer, and have those at the same time, and see if you can kind of pick out really hone in on that sensory experience, so that when you know exactly what to look for, in that beer, or if you discover that flavor, you've got that memory association with it. So that's one thing I do a lot more. I think I posted a picture of myself smelling a horse blanket, an actual horse blanket. It was kind of funny, but at the same time, it really dialed it in for me, because it's like, yeah, it smells like sweaty horse, but it also smells like hay and grass. Like you get those two together, and yeah, I know exactly what horse blanket is in beer now. And I can differentiate it from barnyard and basement, and just some of those experiences that you get that you don't actually get out and do it. It can be a little bit more challenging.
That's a really good idea. I have to do that. Just not the horse blanket.
Go around sniffing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just say one more strategy I've had is if you're tasting something in a beer and you just can't place it. One of the best things I find is just go into like Rate Beer or Beer Advocate. I find Rate Beer is a little bit better for this. And just start, don't read the ratings, but just go through reviews and start looking for something that makes your brain go, holy shit, that's it.
Yeah, I've done that.
And the last one I had with that was soot and leather. I was tasting, and it was a good leather taste, not a oxidization leather. Although that can be good too. And it was just one of those ones where I was just stumped, and I finally dawned upon it. I thought, holy crap, that's it. It's exactly what I'm tasting. And then ever since that moment, I can pick that flavor out a lot easier now. So I find that's you got to go through quite a few reviews sometimes. Some of them are pretty funny, but
some are way off.
Yeah, that's a good strategy. Or the adverse is if you're with a group of people, like talk about it. Oh, that's probably even better.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Any other ones?
I got one.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Carl.
Okay. I didn't really taste off flavors or anything in beer. I just tasted beer, good beer, bad beer, until I started homebrewing. And that's when I discovered a lot of off flavors. And yeah, through that, I honestly think that's because, you know, when you've had a lot of good beer and you're trying lots of beer and then you finally get to take your crack at it, um, you're pretty critical of your own stuff. And what I discovered was I would find, you know, the smaller things, I would really look for them and try and improve on them. And I rarely made a good beer, but I definitely became more critical of beer generally that way. And was able to notice things like, you know what, I probably put too much air into that beer and oxidized it. And through that, I sort of realized what oxidation was. Um, and, you know, just knowing what mistakes I made and then tasting off flavors, you could sort of link them up together afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know my first time getting an off flavor was, I won't say what beer it was, but I was drinking it and going, this tastes like buttered popcorn. Like something's up here. And I like buttered popcorn, but it just didn't work for the beer. And that's one of the most prominent ones I taste, actually, of off flavors. It's just the one I actually catch on more.
Yeah, and for me, that's actually still one of the hardest ones for me to pick up is the diacetyl.
That's a good thing.
Yeah,
It
that
really
is.
actually is, and I'm fortunate. I've gotten better with it over time. But you know, through the training in the beginning, that one was tough for me because it is very similar to that caramel, that butterscotch, and that toffee that some malts can actually give off. And the fact that it's actually acceptable in some styles and created on purpose is it's tricky.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, but now I'm at the point where when I, you know, go to the movie theater, I don't want butter on my popcorn because when I'm done that movie, I'm going to go home and I'm going to drink a beer and all I'm going to smell is the popcorn and the butter on it. And it's going to make me think that the beer is just terrible. So you got to get away from that.
Put on rubber gloves.
Yeah, I perceive the texture of that one a little bit more than the flavor. It's the sort of the slippery.
That
texture.
slick
Yeah.
feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that, and it almost comes across a little soapy, but then it finishes up with butter.
Yeah, and I mean, if you when you get that really off one, that really buttery, you're like, whew, yeah, that's just, you know, doing diacetyl tests in breweries and things as well. You're like, yeah, no, that's nowhere near ready to go. Yeah.
I believe it. Ugh.
Okay, so I guess the other question I had prepared was, what sort of like 2 or 3 tips do you have for somebody on sort of just the hobbyist or the enthusiast level for just top tips, I guess, for tasting, for building a beer collection, for serving? What do you think is the most important thing for somebody to know if they're getting into this?
I mean, it's really just you're going to get whatever you put into it, I guess. If you really want to appreciate the beer, take the time, experiment as well. That's the thing is, you know, glassware, temperatures, food pairings, things of that nature. Those are going to be the things that really make it stand out for you. You know, and sometimes the best revelation you can have is a terrible food pairing. One of those ones where you like that food and you like that beer, but for some reason the two of them just make both of them terrible, and it almost makes it more of a oh wow moment because, you know, when things work together, it's beautiful, it's music, it's like, yeah, that's great, I love it, it's so well together, but you miss how the chemistry can actually affect each other in a different way. So it's really fun. Just experiment. You know, that's what I love about beer. It is it's an experience. Every glass you have is a different experience. It's made by somebody different with a different, you know, outlook. And yeah, just try it as many ways as you can, and you'll see those differences.
I guess just to touch on that, you mentioned glassware, and I was actually going to bring up glassware because I'm in the camp that glassware is very important. You just look at places like Belgium, where they almost every beer, if not every brewery, has their own specific glass. Is it just because of aroma, or what is it that the glasses really do?
I mean, aroma is a big part of it, but depending on the style, that's going to play a big role as well. Sessionability, you know, like a barley wine glass or a Russian Imperial Stout glass, you're not going to want to drink in a 20-ounce pint. And also, having that snifter aspect of it, you can help warm it up. You hold on to it; it's a little bit cozier. Pilsner glasses, because Pilsners tend to be a little less aromatic than ales are, or any sort of lagers. That's why they tend to flare out, just to push all of that aspect out. Hefeweizen glasses, if you really look at them closely, have a little bevel around the edge, so they do the little vase, and then the edge is a little bit beveled as well, kind of going inside the glass, so that it just holds onto that head and that foam to just keep that texture going for as long as possible. So it does enhance the experience. Everything, your taste is very subjective to your aroma as well.
Yeah,
so however you can capture that aroma is going to enhance it.
Yeah, and then like companies like Spieglo is the name, I think. They do like the IPA glass, and they also have a stout glass now that do similar things.
Yep.
You're able to hold it, warm it up if you want, or you can hold it so you're not warming it up. I think the idea of the IPA
I
glass
use the Spiegel Belgian glass for almost everything, even though it's probably not suitable.
Yeah.
I know. Take away my card here. Just take everything away. But the stout glass, it's amazing the difference it does make when you use it. I do have those as well, so it's nice. It's got that. It's similar to your IPA glass, Mike, that you're using, but rather than it being kind of shapely at the bottom, it's cut right across. So you've got the stem, and then it just straight across. So you can really hold on to it, warm it up, swirl it around, get a great aroma out of it.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the camp of like it. Some people think it matters too much, but I will say from a functional perspective, most of the glasses, when they're designed that way, they just, like a stout glass like that, you can pour a beer with a proper head, and you're right. The function of being able to hold it, warm it up, like those things are fantastic. And I think that's the biggest benefit you get from them. You try pouring a Saison into a pint glass or the wrong glass, and it either foams up way too much, or you just don't get quite the same, there's way too much carbonation going on there, right? So you need something that's going to actually be able to, deliver that properly. So I'm more of the sort of the just pure function thing of the glasses. I think sometimes people go a little bit too much, and you're not going to make amazing beer that much better, and you're not going to make a shitty beer better. You're not going to make a bad beer worse by serving it in a pint glass. But there is a functional aspect to the glassware which can enhance the experience. So I think that's the big one for me.
So I'm actually curious. We're talking about glassware, so I'm using that crappy kind of standard pint glass. Does that do anything wrong for my beer? Like, am I doing myself a disservice by drinking out of this? I mean,
you kind of are. In the sense, if you're asking and you want the honest opinion, that the shaker glass that you're using is the standard bar glass. It doesn't do anything for your beer. It's not going to make your beer worse, obviously, unless it's dirty and you haven't cleaned it or whatever. But it's definitely the minimalist for your beer. It's not going to enhance it in any way. Like, what are you drinking?
And in my defense, that was the only clean glass today. So I do have other glasses. That was just dishwashing day. So.
And I mean, that's fine. It's again, I mean, like, it's really what you want to get out of it. But you don't need to have 20 different glasses for 20 different beers, but having 4 different styles is definitely going to enhance your experiences when you get to those styles of beers.
So what should those 4 be? Like, I'm guessing a tulip style. What else should I be looking at?
So I like a hef glass, so that vase, a Belgian tulip, sort of like this guy, the IPA like Mike has, the stout glass, which is that shape, a pilsner or lager glass, something that's flared at the top, and then maybe even like a wine glass or a snifter of some kind.
Yeah, I like using tiki glasses for sours.
Oh yeah,
because you really want to warm them up usually, right? So most of them, some you do, but yeah, that way you can hold. Go ahead.
Sorry, I do like the glass that Carnell has for sours a lot. That is
Tiku,
a perfect sour glass.
I had a couple questions about this glass, actually, because I was sold this under the pretense that it was the best glass ever for tasting off note, which intrigued me and kind of upset me because like all my beer is going to taste not as good now. But is that true?
I've never heard that. No, I mean,
You got sold, son.
yeah. I don't know why you'd ever want to buy a glass that's going to enhance negativity.
Yeah.
Buy a glass that's going to enhance your experience in a positive way. But I do love that style of glass. Absolutely.
I love that you hate shakers because I hate them so much. But what is this supposed? I mean, it's a beautiful glass, is what I like about it. It looks nice. You know.
So, I mean, with that glass specifically is keep holding it up there. That the shape of the bottom of it, so when you pour it in, it's going to cause that cascading and waving effect, which is going to release all your CO2, which is going to push that aromatic up. The way it kind of closes at the top is going to catch any aroma as well to sort of funnel it up towards you, and the way it flares out at the top is also going to then just push it out again. So you're kind of creating this condensing and then relieving effect, and that little brim around in that center area is going to essentially hug your head and keep it as brisk as it can, depending on the beer, of course, right? An English mild's not really going to do anything for you in that glass.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a farmhouse. I've got the Four Winds, and I think it's Powell. Is it?
Four Winds and Powell.
I know, but does it not look like Postmark? Can I just say that? And like when you see that it looks like it's a Postmark beer.
Totally. Doesn't taste like a Postmark beer.
No.
That's really good marketing on Postmark part because
it's insane, these cans. Like any normal can with a sticker on it, it's good beer, which is terrible to say.
Adds at least 1 star, man.
That's right, yeah. It's at least 1 star improvement on Untappd. Yep.
If it came in a 4-pack, that's another star right there.
Your door.
it opens another star.
Yeah, but yeah, no, that's why I like the TQs for the sours. Again, I the functional piece for me is really the stem too, because you're not warming it up as you're drinking it. So you're going to get it staying a little bit more consistent temperature, a little cooler, and you can stick your finger out if you want. Pretend you're all fancy. One thing I will say, and Cardinal, I'm not picking on you here, but if you hold that up again, too much beer in there.
Yeah, that was my next question. What is the appropriate fill level on one of these things? I know nothing.
Well, I don't know. You could probably speak to this, Paul, but in my younger days, I did get to level 1 of sommelier, and it's basically the same rules as the wine glass, is my understanding, where you basically just fill it to when it starts to curve back in.
Oh,
I don't know. That's just what I learned when I was 21. So
need a bigger TQ glass.
Yeah, I mean, I would go maybe Cornell, your glass when you were holding it. I would go maybe a third of the way up would be. I mean, that's if it depends on if you're just analyzing the beer and you want to taste it, or you just want to drink it. I mean, there's a difference.
Not volume.
Sorry, I mean, if you were going to want to analyze that appropriately and judge it, you can't. Can you swirl that right now? If you wanted to really give it a good swirl, what's going to happen?
do it.
I fill on my computer.
Yeah. I mean, you want to have enough that you can play around with, and you want to have that headspace to capture aroma, so you can get your nose right in there and really take it in.
That's good to know. Good stuff.
Yeah,
You're almost there.
I think it's one of those things that people forget about the glassware is there, for the most part. I mean, again, there's the, it doesn't have the drinking experience, but if you really want to get the most out of the glass, you don't always fill it up. You really want to truly experience what the glass delivers. But again, that's just when you're analyzing. You just want to enjoy the beer. I mean, I'm of the opinion that you put it in whatever. I've had plenty of the Yelder in a freaking hotel paper cup. It was great. It was fantastic. It tasted just as good as the IPA glass to me, anyway.
Well, a great beer is going to taste great no matter what, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So don't fret about it. But if you have the glass, I mean, sure, go for it, right?
Yeah.
Enjoy it and make it a good
Can I just
experience.
be that guy for a second and just say that there's the functionality, there's the aromas, there's the flavor, but sometimes I actually just want my beer to look pretty. Like I just want it to look good in the glass.
Yeah.
And I don't see anything wrong with that. But
There's nothing wrong with it.
Cheers to that.
No, that was the point that I was going to make, because there is this whole presentation portion of it. And when I was super young and working in a kitchen as a prep chef and a sous chef, the chef would always say, "Your eyes eat it first," and it's true. It changes your perception of how it looks. Like, if something looks beautiful, you're going to experience it in a more positive light.
Yeah,
there's a whole psychology around it, and so I like great glassware when I'm out for dinner, and or if I'm ordering a beer from a craft beer bar and your thing is craft beer and it's on your menu and it's wherever, if you're serving the beer to me in a shoe, I'm probably going to complain. But if I'm at home and that's all I have, that's as good as I'm going to get.
Yeah.
Yeah, who's mastered that is Guinness. Everything from the pour right down to the glass.
Yeah. It's a huge marketing side, which being a marketer, I'm super interested in. But I don't know, I'm conflicted, because part of me and my whole philosophy behind my blogging is the vessel doesn't matter. The beer doesn't matter. If you're enjoying it, awesome, that's great. But then there's a part of me that has this whole nerdy appreciation for the industry and what makes a great beer, and based on the situation, it's better, and you want the best possible opportunity for that beer to showcase itself. So it's situationalization, which is a word I just made up, and I'm going to stick with it.
Sounds good to me.
Trademark
I like
that
fake
shit.
words.
I don't think that's a word.
There goes Carnell again.
Yeah, what I would really love to know is you mentioned your epiphany beers earlier, and I'd love to know what some of those epiphany beers were for you.
I mean, the broad spectrum, the traditional Belgian Trappist ales were the big ones for me, just big and flavorful. Some, the Chimay, of course, you have to have those. The Duvals, they come through. They're big and they're beautiful. But locally, for me was the craft beer side. The first one I remember was actually probably the Old Yale Sasquatch Stout.
Okay.
I still love that beer. Just super, all that coffee on it. For me, it was just one of those beers that I just will always remember. Anything from Breakside, really, like you can't go wrong. The brewery, I'm constantly having new epiphany beers all the time, which is what I love about this, is that you get that beer every once in a while that just blows you away.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds you why you plan your alcoholism 2 years in advance by cellaring stuff. It's really a beautiful thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Actually, that was one question I had, is cellaring worthwhile? Because I've been experimenting a little bit. I haven't done much. And I had somebody recently tell me that, it doesn't really add anything that's not already present in a beer. So what's your take on cellaring?
It definitely is kind of a bit of an art in the sense of what you choose. Certain beers are definitely designed for it. Certain things are not. I'm still learning that myself, because, I've got beers I've had for a couple of years that I still haven't tried. It definitely makes a difference, in my opinion, especially on those, 13% beers that come out. They need a little time to settle. They're still quite rough around the edges. It's going back to kind of the epiphany things. Main Street, the Stag and Pheasant, a couple of years ago, I had that one, and I was just like, wow. And it took me an hour and a half to drink the beer, because it was just so intense and so beautiful, but it was still pretty heavy and sharp. So I went out immediately, got another one, put it down in the cellar for a year. And when I had that after a year, the difference was astronomical. Yeah. It had just softened up quite a bit. It had gotten very smooth and mellow. The flavors were all still as beautiful as they were. They just weren't as harsh. And I think the best way to do it, in my opinion, to experiment with it, is to get a 6-pack of Herminator when it comes out. And that's a 6-pack. So you put it away. You have one every 2 months. You have one every 2 months that lasts you an entire year, and you make notes of it every time you have it, and you'll just watch the difference of how it progresses and melds and softens, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Or get 2 and have it for 2 years.
or get 2 6-packs and do 1 a month. But I don't know if the 1 a month is going to be really that much of a difference. But every couple of months you'll see the difference, and that's enough to start you off to see that representation of how it might be.
Yeah, for sure.
And is there a rule of thumb for a beer that's going to be good to cellar and a beer that's not going to be good to cellar? Like, is there something that I can kind of go by there, or is it just kind of like experiment and see what works?
I mean, generally anything like with a high ABV is going to be pretty good for a while. In that 9% range. Anything with a wild yeast or some bacteria in it is going to usually do better. Things like Brettanomyces takes a full year before those flavors really develop naturally. So you definitely want to experiment with those times. And but yeah, sours, funky beers, high ABV beers usually do quite well.
Yeah, I cellar quite a bit of beer, and my kind of general rule now is try it fresh. And if it's in any way a little bit unbalanced, something's really harsh, is a really good candidate for cellaring. Or secondly, just looking at the beer, the ingredients, and the alcohol level, and just thinking about, look, what do you think it's going to do? Right? Could it benefit from getting a little bit more sour? If it's a Brett beer, do you want it to be drier and funkier and explode when you open it if you cellar it for too long? That happens. So you just think about what the flavors, because generally when you cellar, flavor. You mentioned it, Paul. They smooth out, they mellow, they blend in. Some of them, after a long period of time, will oxidize and turn into leather and sherry versus cardboard. Some will turn into cardboard. So you got to kind of be careful with that, and you also have to set the expectation that when you do it, you're going to lose a bit of beer. I lost an entire case to an infection that developed over time. $170 case of beer. That sucked. The company was very nice and sent me something else. But I've had other ones that you just you open it and it's just garbage. So it's a learning experience, and I don't recommend cellaring really expensive bottles for very long. At least try it fresh, so and in most cases the beer is going to be pretty good at that point. But if you really want to try around and experiment, just go for it. And don't cellar IPAs. That's the only one I've found does not ever benefit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just ask Mike, right?
Which one?
Yeah.
Well, these days the stores do a good enough job of selling your IPAs for you. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's it also to take into consideration is the time that the beer's already been aged before it's been bottled. There are some beers out there that have already been in a barrel for a year or 2 years or 18 months or whatever it might be. It's probably good to go as it is. It might not get any better. It's, I like the rule of thumb that I like to use is buy 2, drink 1 now, cellar 1. What's the worst that can happen? Even if the one that you cellared turns out to be crap, at least you got 1 good one.
And if it's so good, just buy an extra one.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I think we can probably wrap it up a little bit. Why don't we just go through what we're drinking quickly? Start at Mike.
Who's ready? I'm ready.
Yeah, what are you drinking there?
Persephone's Best Bitter.
Nice.
I love Persephone. I love bitters. What could go wrong? It's actually, it's a good beer.
It's got to be the best.
What's that?
It's got to be the best.
Yeah, no. It's a decent bitter. If people that are into bitters are probably hard pressed to find a good example of a bitter or best bitter around. Very few people do it. I think this one's pretty darn close to style.
They're usually way too bitter.
If you've tasted a bitter in like an English pub, you know what it should taste like. And so trying to find that replicated on this side of the pond, as they say,
you gotta go to Callister.
Yeah. You, Carnell?
Yeah, I went through a couple things. It was interesting talking about last moment IPAs sitting on the shelf a little too long. It's my second time drinking the Melvin 2x4. I really sought it out. First time, accidentally got a 6-month-old can, and it was shot. This is 2.5. I grabbed it in Bellingham. Great. Amazing. The other one I got a hold of was the American Farmhouse. That's what I'm working on now. It's delicious. It's what I would be looking for in American Farmhouse IPA. It makes sense to me. And I've had the two of these, and I've just realized what their ABV is. And yeah, I'm going to go to bed. And yeah, they're good. They taste good. They taste good.
And what about you, Chelsea?
Sorry, I had my mute stuck. I don't know if you can see that I have the Idaho 7 Sour from Powell Street.
Nice.
Kind of crappy. I forgot that I had this beer. It was in the back of my fridge. So IPAs, not so great a couple months afterwards. It still has, like I'm looking, it has says notes of apricot, kiwi, and herbal, and that's there in the sour, but I think it would have been really good when I first bought it. So don't hide them in the back of your fridge.
Yeah, that's a kettle sour.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those tend not to age very well either. They just turn into vinegar.
Yeah.
No, it is sour. I like sour. It's good, but yeah, it was probably a really beautiful beer a couple months ago. So
Makes sense. What about you, Paul?
Oh, you jumped way across. I have the double secret probation, the collaboration from Bomber and Coast Mountain. It's a Doppelsticker Alt.
Yes.
8.6%, nice and malty.
Yeah, I was a big fan of that one.
What's that?
Big fan of that one.
Yeah, it turned out really good, and yeah, it's 8.5%, so that's not bad either.
Not at all. How about you, Steve?
So I've done two so far. I've got the B&A Brewing Earl Pale Ale, so it's Earl Grey infused pale ale from Kelowna. In bottle, it's pretty good. If you can get it from the brewery in a growler, it's amazing. And then earlier tonight, I was drinking the Steel and Oak Dark Lager. And just as a quick shout out, these things are amazing.
Yes, they are. How about
So
you?
that's the Growler Works pressurized growler.
How about you, Terry?
I'm not drinking anything, but I'll give a pretend Singularity shout out there. 2017. Yeah, no, I got stuff to do later tonight, so
Makes sense.
I'm
Yeah.
dry for the moment.
Wow. All right. I guess I'm last here. I'm having the Broadside India Pale Ale from Torchlight Brewing in Nelson. It's not available in Vancouver right now, but from what I understand, it actually is available in the Okanagan now, in some of the liquor stores in Penticton and Kelowna, and some of the pubs as well. So they're expanding, which is really nice. And they got a new brewery in the works currently.
yeah, one of the guys in Camera South Okanagan, he does their I guess marketing locally, and he's bringing a bunch of their stuff in, and really a huge fan of Torchlight. So I've been seeing and hearing a lot about their beer recently, and it's really good. Yeah.
Agreed. All right. Guess we'll wrap up this episode. I'd like to thank Paul for joining us. Check out his website at drinksmarter.ca. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.